This presentation was kind of a last-minute thing. We got our schedules mixed up, and I volunteered to jump in and do this. Some of the things I should start off by saying first, my name is Patrick Lowenthal. I am an instructional designer at Boise State University. I moved to Boise, I guess, May last year, or the summer of 2011. I had worked the last few years with the University of Colorado and CU Online. I still teach online in the ILT program there. And I was asked, I guess recently, the last month, by Joni to join the FLC crew to try to, expand our reach and to get other people who are interested in teaching and learning online and discussing it to come together and to talk. And I think one of our plans is to try to structure it more this spring and see how it goes. Do we get more people showing up? Do we not? And so we had our topic set up where we were originally going to do ebooks, and then this came up. So I guess the point being is the talk I'm going to give, it's not just a talk. I'm going to kind of make my argument, give some suggestions and strategies, then I'm going to open up for discussion. But this is based on a paper Joni and I are writing. And so the presentation's by no means finalized. This was kind of a last-minute thing, so this is a little rough, but it's more sharing with you the ideas of something that we're excited, that we're thinking about. In some ways, this is nothing new. This is stuff we've been thinking about for a couple years, but regardless. What I will say is Idaho, in a recent survey, had something like, out of 50 states, it was ranked 48th for the slowest internet. So it's really bad internet here. And so I've actually not led a Connect session since I moved to Idaho. When I've been part of Connect sessions, I've just used the chat box because I'm just afraid of the delay and everything that goes with it. So I'm hoping that if I just keep talking, the delay will make sense, and maybe I'll pause my camera and it won't be so bad. So I'm going to pause.
Patrick, I'm
yes.
your wingman too. I'm your wingman if you need anything. I'll try to keep an eye on the comments too, okay?
Good, great. All right, so I'm going to pause this. Okay. So that's a goofy smile, but fine. All right. So I'm going to basically maximize my screen, and I'm going to talk about this concept called web presence. And basically, before I launch my PowerPoint and I go into it, and this isn't that short, and really the idea is the first part of the presentation I'll make an argument of why this is important, and then I'm going to go into what are some strategies that faculty or academics can do. Given this. So the idea, and it's my kind of research area, has historically been this concept called social presence. Social presence is a little different. Basically what I'm interested here is, as academics, how do we have a presence online in Google? Essentially, when someone Googles you, what do they find? And not just what do they find, what don't they find? And what should they find? And so that's kind of this talk about, what are things that you can do as an academic to improve your search engine ranking? And so for any real serious search engine optimization SEO geek out there, you're not gonna I'm gonna give such a baby talk on this that it's just gonna bore you, because real search engine optimization people, these are people who get paid big bucks by companies to come in, and sometimes even universities, to make sure that when someone Googles X, that company's website comes up, because they're selling that widget and they want to make sure everyone finds their widget. I'm not going to get into all that real esoteric stuff about, people even talk about screen color and does metadata help and how so and how many words should you have, and I'm not going to get real deep into any of that. And in fact, I'm not really an expert on all that. And so if for some reason you're starting your own company and you need an SEO expert, you need to go find them. You're not going to get it here. But what we're going to talk about is rethinking scholarship, this kind of concept of impact and dissemination of knowledge in what I call a Google world. Now, for those who don't like Google, just insert, whenever I use Google, insert Bing or Yahoo or whatever, okay? But let's get going in. And like I said, this is based on a paper that Joni Dunlap and I are writing, that we hope actually to publish if we're lucky in the Chronicle of Higher Ed. We've been talking with them. And it's basically just this idea that the world is changing, and what it means to be an academic is changing, and what are things that academics are doing differently, if anything, Web presence, I started getting into the concept of more, do you have a presence online? Actually, years ago, through Brent Wilson, a faculty in the ILT program. He had all of his papers online, and he had a great web presence, and other faculty don't, and so I just started thinking through that. So for years now, where I teach online, I'm not really a faculty, a tenure-line faculty or tenured faculty. I kind of spend my time in both worlds, and so I'm interested in this idea of what does scholarship look like in this new world, because the reality is the world's changed a lot in the last 10 years. Try to think of a time when there was no iPod. Try to think of a time when you didn't have TiVo, right? You had to actually watch commercials. You couldn't pause live TV. Or a time when there wasn't Wikipedia. I mean, the world has changed, and we can't really necessarily just blame it on Google or Wikipedia or this, that. And some people like to describe the way the world's changed as bad. I mean, we hear so many faculty talk about, well, Wikipedia is not a great source for information. And that students shouldn't just cite that, or sometimes they shouldn't cite it at all. However, at the same time, those same faculty will a lot of times be the ones who, at home in their personal life, they'll be the first. If someone has a question or if they need some answers, they go to Wikipedia. And so the world that we live in has changed drastically, and Andrew Keene wrote this book, The Cult of the Amateur, and talked about how this internet world where anyone can read and write and publish online is kind of ruining the world, like we're in need of editors. And, I don't buy much of his argument. Some of it I do, and I think he makes some good points, and I think his book is really interesting. But the idea is that the world has changed, and so faculty, and my talk is bigger. It's more academics, because in my world, because I'm not a traditional faculty, I see myself as an academic, and I believe that the role of research and knowledge dissemination isn't just for faculty. And so for me, you'll hear me use the word faculty at times, but I really mean academics in general. And I hope that that point comes home, because this is not just for faculty in a tenure track job. This is really for academics in the 21st century. So the idea is, so the world, we'll actually just go back to this. So faculty, the old days, what they would do is they would, when they're going to create, let's say they're going to publish results from a study, they find a journal. Usually it's their school or college or wherever they work has told them these are the acceptable journals. So they find the top tier journals they publish in, and they publish it, and they hope it, people read it. They hope people write about what they did. They hope people cite it, and they hope that this somehow, helps them get tenure. And the article, the journal might give them off these these off prints, or I forget what they're called. 20 of them or 50 of them in a handout to their colleagues. And then we went through this period where faculty would, and I remember kind of going through graduate school being told that, well, when you write something, what faculty should do is email it to other colleagues around the world who do the same type of thing. But it's still kind of this old one-on-one model of, well, here I got something, and I'm going to pass it off, and I hope you read it. But the world has changed, right? I mean, we find ourselves, and it's not just about Google and Wikipedia, but it's this idea of knowledge creation, knowledge production is just going exponentially off the charts. And I was trying to find last minute a good diagram that would show that. I was actually looking for one of those tickers that would show, like, and Google does it like in Gmail, when it shows you how much information they have or how much storage. I forget how they do it, but it's kind of this idea of McDonald's, a billion search. Is knowledge is being created exponentially. And so while we live in what I call a Google world now, where the first thing we do is we go to Google for answers, we find information just producing and exponentially, and so as I'm reading up on this, a zettabyte, I mean, it's this idea of, there was a time when a terabyte was seen as this like crazy amount of storage. With all this information being created, we're well beyond that, all right? And so if you're this faculty who you're writing, or academics in general, and you're creating this this piece of information, knowledge, all right, research, and you're finding that journal and you're hoping someone reads it, well, it's getting basically drowned in this world where, for better or for worse, students aren't necessarily going to the library anymore. And librarians out there, you can definitely, I don't see that is necessarily a bad thing, and I don't mean to say the library is going anywhere, but rather to say that the library is interfacing in different ways with students. But this old idea of students going to the library and roaming the stacks, it's kind of gone, you know, and forward-thinking libraries are well past that idea, and they know this, right? In some ways, libraries are, you know, librarians are everything I talk about. They're like, yeah, we've been talking about this for years. But even, you know, when you want to find research, students, and I think David talked about an ECAR or an EDUCAUS, I think it was EDUCAUS study that talked about students not going through their library even database anymore. They're just starting with Google, you know, and maybe Google Scholar if we're hopeful, and hopefully Google Scholar goes in through the university, and that, you know, there is the library still playing in this game because they have a central role, I believe. But the idea being is, I believe that students who are later going to be graduate students and later going to be professors, as well as current professors, a lot of times when they just need an article on X, they go to Google. They don't necessarily go take the time to log in their library. They might even go to Google Scholar, maybe. And so the idea is, well, in this world where people are going to Google for information, and information's exponentially increasing, where are you as an academic? Because if you're not in Google, essentially you know where, is kind of the argument I'm making. And so, so with that, you know, people talk about the university, the structure is changing because we're in a world where you can get all the answers, arguably, on your phone, right? You can't see it. So, and I'm real animated. I'm looking at the camera, which is hilarious, and I just forgot I had paused the picture. But regardless, you're missing my hands and everything flying up and down. But so the university, a lot of people are questioning, well, where's the university going to be in 20 years? I mean, we're in a place now where if people can, with their smartphones, you know, with a couple click of a button and Google, find all the answers. Now, many of us will argue it's not that simple, but regardless, they can get answers like that. What's the role of the university? Well, I think the university, just like the library, has a central role in this new world we find ourselves in. One of the things when I think about a university is I think that we have multiple roles in the university. If you're an academic, not just a faculty, you might be in a teaching role, you might be in a research role, you might be in this, what some call publisher perish world. But regardless, I believe that the university's job is knowledge creation. And as Keene and other people say, there's other people out there creating knowledge, if you will, or at least information. All right? But the university is in a unique place where we hope that we're taking all this information, we're helping creating knowledge, whether that's just helping students learn, or that we're actually creating new knowledge by doing research. And I believe that that is the role of the university in a lot of ways, is knowledge creation. We're in the knowledge creation business. And so if we're creating knowledge, and knowledge is growing exponentially, well, how do we make sure students who are just going to Google, and some faculty and administrators, right, it's not just them, or they're just going to Wikipedia, how do we make sure that they find what we're doing? It's not enough, I argue, to simply find that top-tier journal and publish it anymore. I mean, there seems like there's journals popping up left and right? I mean, there's so many different journals that I don't believe that it's going to be good enough anymore to simply publish in that exceptional journal. Could be wrong, you know, but my theory is that we live in a Google world, and that academics, we have to learn to find out, well, what's our place in the Google world, and how, if we're creating knowledge, whether that's through teaching materials, whether that's through primary research, how are we disseminating that? How are we making sure that people read our stuff? Because in my world, I'm not a tenure-track professor, so when I engage in scholarship, it's not to get tenure. Who knows, maybe I'll end up on that track at some point in my life, and I will be concerned with tenure and promotion. That will be kind of my main concern. Right now, in my world, and I believe that deep down most academics, when they create knowledge, they do it because they want other people to read it. And not just the 15 people who read that one journal, right? And we know that, and faculty out there, they've taken time to publish in this top-notch journal, right, this great article, and they get like one citation. They're just like, what happened? Well, it could be that maybe that article isn't as great as they think, right? Or that the research is so esoteric. But it could also be that people just aren't finding it. It's just buried in the sea of information. So, that's kind of my argument. My argument is that the world has changed, and that Google's king, and that when you Google yourself, if you don't find your stuff, whatever that stuff is that you're creating, you're basically obsolete. Now, obviously I'm trying to make a big argument and be very polemical, and I want to engage emotion, right? Because I think there are a lot of reasons why you might argue, well, what I'm doing is proprietary and I can't publish it, or yeah, the argument goes. But my guess is the majority of what you can do, you could be finding a way to share it with others and to be sharing it online through Google. And so subtly within my argument is this kind of belief in an open access world, and this way of openly sharing everything. And so we'll kind of come back to that. Okay, so 15 steps to improve your search ranking. So, the idea when you think of search engine optimization, the idea of SEO first is when someone Googles your company, let's say your thing, they're looking for this widget, how do you ensure that you show up on that first page of Google results? I mean, that's what you really want. And some people will pay for it, and some people do all kinds of, what some people would say unethical strategies to make that happen. We're not getting in all that. But implicit in all this is that you first have a presence on the web. And so if you haven't, you need to Google yourself. And I realize some people believe, well, that's narcissistic, you shouldn't be. In this world, that's kind of like your living resume, if you will. It's your brand. And you need to find out what your brand is, and you need to be checking it out. But when I talk about search engine ranking or even search engine optimization, it's a little different than the traditional sense, because in the traditional sense, people are trying to steer users to one website. Really what I'm talking about is how do you steer users to your content, your brand, your information, your knowledge creation, your knowledge production, wherever that might be. Alright, so we're going to go through and we're going to talk about these 15 steps. There's actually a few more that, and even under the 15, there's lots of other little sub-steps to think about. But my thought is this, is that most faculty academics aren't going to engage in all of these. And there's actually some more that I haven't thought of, but that these are things that you should be thinking about if you're writing or producing knowledge. If you're conducting research, or you're teaching courses, these are things I think you should be doing. So the first is to get a personal website. Now, I'm not talking like your university website. I'm talking a personal website, and ideally with your name in the URL. And once again, you're trying to establish your brand as a thought leader, as you are the one people turn to for this. And so the first step when you think about search engine optimization or web presence is, well, you got to have a presence. And so while it's great to have university sites, and I can go out here and show you from places I work, I have a site on Regis, I have a site at UCD. I mean, the list goes on, but I also have a personal website. And so for some of you that sounds crazy, or maybe you get a personal website on Google Sites. It's easy to use, it's actually a great tool. Well, for $10 a year, you can actually add a personal domain to that Google Sites thing where you can have your personal website for $10 a year. That's it. A personal website that you don't need a web developer to help you with. A personal website that when people go to your name, they can find. So in that $10, you're just paying for your domain name, whatever it is. Now, if you have a popular name, like I have a colleague, his name is John White. It's about as actually John Wesley White III. Well, there's still actually a number of John Wesley Whites, and there's actually a couple John Wesley Whites III. But when we started looking, I think we had to go with his URL, or his domain name, is actually johnwesleywhite.net. And so you have to get creative. Maybe you have to have dashes on there. Who knows? But you need a personal website. Spend the $10, whether it's Google Sites, but if you need more options, go through like GoDaddy or somewhere else, and etc. But you need to do this. And the sooner you do it, the better. So I feel so strongly about this, actually, or this idea of finding your your stake of land in this new world we find ourselves in. I've bought JordanLowenthal.com, AshlynLowenthal.com for both my daughters, and my wife, AllisonLowenthal.com. So I spend $30 a year just for their domain names, and my kids are kids. So I don't know what the world's going to be like, but I've grabbed that claim, right? Saying this is their space. Don't know if they'll ever need it, and who knows, the internet might go in a totally different direction. But right now, that's what I've done. So this first thing is get a personal website, do it on Google Sites, spend $10 a year for your domain name, add it, and then when people type in your name, chances are you're going to come up. Not always, once again, depends what you do. Alright, so the second thing, it's not just good enough to have a personal website. The idea with search engine optimization, or the way to improve your search engine ranking, is you have more content. And it's not just, it's a fine kind of balancing act, and different search engines are different, and there's no kind of golden rule, but in a real basic sense, content equals more visitors. Or to think of it another way, is regularly updating your content helps drive more visitors to your site and keep them coming back. So how do you do this? Well, you can maintain a blog. Now, I have a personal blog, and I'll show you at one point, but I'm not like a blogger. Like, there's some people who blog daily or even weekly. I'll go sometimes a month, 6 weeks without posting anything. And that's actually not being real good at caring about my search engine optimization, because I should get on a real regular schedule where at least once every couple of weeks I post something. But maintain a blog, and that's something that Google Sites, you'd have to pull in some other things, and so you have to think through when you get that personal website, how are you going to use it? But maintaining a blog, even if it's just sharing the research of others, right, is one way to do this. You know, because you can post about other people's research, and there's some people who do a great job about this. You know, and I've tried to pick up some of these behaviors from my colleagues, where my area of research is social presence. So when I see a new article on social presence, I try to share that article with other people. The other thing is update your CV or resume, however you think about it. After each publication, presentation, workshop, if you're an instructional designer, you're designing courses, keep it updated. It shouldn't be something that you do once a year when you are up for an evaluation, or it should be something that every time you should update it. Not only should you update it, if you just did a presentation, you should blog about it. So I went on my blog for this presentation. I blogged about it yesterday or the day before, then I tweeted about it. So regular updates, key. Post your manuscripts online. So this is something that I'm actually surprised at how few faculty do. Now, I recommend that when you publish stuff, if you're a traditional faculty, and I'll talk later soon about other types of things besides manuscripts, but if you're writing stuff and you're publishing in journals, books, you name it, you should be making that easier for anyone who wants to find it. Now, there's copyright things to consider, and so be sure to check with the publishers, whoever you're working with, to find out what are the rules about you posting your work online. More often than not, and I got to make sure my audio is still working. Yeah, it is. I have a tendency, of hitting the mute button. But more often than not, most journals or publications, if you can publish what's called a preprint or previous version of the paper. So not the final one that looks, that they published in their book or journal, but a preprint. And if they still don't like that idea, you can often, many faculty will actually do a presentation, say a conference presentation on a paper. So they can post a previous version of their manuscript and then reference, as you see, to this to appear in, or find the original at, or contact me. But the idea is everything that you're writing should be online. Now, I've heard people say, well, the problem with that is then people could steal your work. And I argue actually the opposite. If you start putting all your work online, you're making an argument right away that this is my work and that this person is copying me because I had this on there sooner. So post all manuscripts online. Maybe not the final versions. If you can final versions, wonderful. You can always do a preprint or a previous conference presentation, and sometimes you can find other people who've put the final version. You don't want to violate copyright, fine, but you can link to what they're already sharing. Who knows what their organization's doing to pay for rights to share that. Okay? Don't just post your manuscripts online, post your presentations online. So if you go to slideshare.net/plowenthal, you're going to actually find this presentation that I'm giving right now, the PowerPoint slide deck. So there are lots of ways that you can, so let's say you're not a traditional faculty member, but you do give workshops and presentations. Well, you want to be acknowledged, established as a thought leader in your world. And so the idea is you need to post and share your work online. So I use a site called SlideShare. There's a lot of different sites out there, but you can post this on your personal website. But what I do is I post on SlideShare, I then get embed code, and I embed it on my personal website. So people coming to my personal website can see it. But also, people who are coming to SlideShare who don't know anything about me can see my work, can find my work, and I hope that they'll download and build upon and use my work. Ideally with attribution, because that's the Creative Commons license that I try to select when I'm thinking about it. Sometimes I'll forget, but I like my work available. But another thing I like is I can see, like this one here, I can see down below that 437 people have viewed this. So for academics, I try to present regularly at conferences. There's been a number of times I've presented at a conference where there's been 1 or 2 people show up for my presentation. Now, the argument could be that obviously my presentation might sound boring. Or it could be that at one time it was the last hour, the last day of the conference. I mean, there's lots of reasons. But the idea is, how do you extend your reach? How do you, and there was an article in Inside Higher Ed just about this. Basically, how do you record your presentations and share them? And I think that's even a much better idea than what I'm talking. I'm just talking sharing your PowerPoint deck. But if you can fire up Jing or Camtasia and actually record it and share the recording, even better. But what I love about SlideShare is I can see how many people have seen my presentations. So one of the presentations I've done I think it's 4,000 views. Right? I mean, there's no way. I mean, I've written published articles. No one's. Probably 10 people have read it, right? 4,000 people. And then you don't know, did they all like it? Did they not? I mean, so you don't know all that. But like here, you can start to see when people have shared your stuff, when they've tweeted about it. And in SlideShare, you can pay to get rid of the ads, etc. But I just use it for free. This next idea, post teaching materials online. So this is kind of, once again, I'm slipping in my own belief of this open education kind of movement, and this idea that I believe that education and higher ed is more than just about content and curriculum. That I think it's the way that the teacher plays that role, that crucial role, that matters. But let's say that you work at a teaching college and that it's not important for you to publish in the traditional sense. You engage in different types of scholarship. Well, when you create your teaching materials, share them. Now, I don't do this well. This is actually something that, and partly because I don't teach full-time, I'm an adjunct. So I do share, my PowerPoint presentations. I share publications. But this is an example where I did a screencast on a blog post and then an accompanying screencast on Jing versus Camtasia. Well, I got an email just this last week, actually, from someone at a medical school in Georgia saying how helpful this was. And it actually just made me blush, and it reinforced this idea of the way that you extend your reach and the way that you help others and the way that you network and build community is by posting your work online. And this isn't just about traditional publications. Teaching materials are important. Okay, so the next step is to create Google Alerts. Now, there are other ways to do this, but Google makes it easy, so this is what I use. Now, the idea with Google Alerts is I argue that you should create at least 3 types of Google Alerts. The first type is for your name, and every variation of your name that you have. Because you want to find out when people are posting things about you. Now but just knowing that isn't enough. It's what you do about it. So there's 2 parts to that. One is, let's say people are saying things you don't want them to say. Or let's say that things are being posted that shouldn't be posted. There's steps you can go through to ask Google to take sites down or take things down, and so there's that part of it. But I think the more interesting part, at least for me, because I'm not, at least I've not seen so far, most people aren't saying bad things about me, they're just discussing my work. Well, when I find a Google alert about someone discussing my work, it allows me to go and comment on their blog or to take part in that conversation, right? I mean, so it helps springboard a conversation and a chance where I can share about other things that I'm doing, or maybe I think that they misinterpreted my work. Who knows what? Right? So the next thing is create a Google alert about your research areas. So whatever the key areas are. So I do one for social presence, for teaching presence, and I get weekly updates on this. And once again, it allows me to stay in touch with not just traditional journal articles, but what's happening in the blogosphere about my research area. And it provides me an opportunity to engage in the conversation, maybe even share my work, maybe collaborate on other projects with other people. And the last type of Google alert that I recommend is one for every publication that you've done. So if you're a traditional academic and you've done a publication entitled whatever, Tweeting the Night Away is one that Joni and I did on Twitter. Well, by creating Google alerts for each one of those, you can find out when people are talking about your work. And because sometimes they don't always come up and recognize you, the authors, they just talk about an article. And that one allows you to get beyond just traditional journals like who's citing you. It's who's discussing your work in a broader sense, and sometimes it helps you engage in the conversation and to build more networks. Analytics, number 7. And I'm going to try to hurry up because I really want us to have some time to talk, and I notice that I'm going a little too long here. It's not as interactive as I usually would like. But analytics, there's a lot written about it, but here I'm talking about, it's one thing to have a web presence, but it's another thing to track and to see how many people are showing up on your personal website. What are they reading? What are they not? Do you see a trend by when you post blog posts or new articles and how many visitors you get? So Google Analytics makes it really easy if you have a Google account, whether you have a WordPress blog or a Google Sites, set up Google Analytics and start tracking. You can start seeing where people are coming, what are they visiting. Okay. So this next thing is publish in open access journals. Now, I'm not saying that you need to publish everything in an open access journal. I respect that some faculty, for tenure, they have to publish in some select few journals. The problem with those traditional journals is they're closed, and they're closed to only people who have access to a library who has a subscription to them, more often than not. I mean, there's other ways if they have a strong literacy that they can find ways to use their local library, but a lot of times they're not going to do this. Why? Because they're going to Google. And so if they can't find your work, it makes it hard. There's also other countries where people don't have access to, don't have the money for all this. And so I recommend that you publish some of your work, especially the work that builds upon other work you've done, in open access journals, because you can help other people access and read your work. So I've published with Joni 2 articles and David 1 in EDUCAUSE Quarterly. This is just one, and this one, Horton Hears Heat, has had 6,500 plus views. Now I say views rather than reads because I don't know if people really read it all, but that's pretty impressive because I can guarantee you some of the other stuff I've written, there's probably been only like 5 people to read it, right? And so I really recommend publishing some of your work, maybe all of it if you can, who knows, in open access journals. Now, not all open access journals are equal in my mind. You want to find some that give you analytics where you can track how many people are reading your work. You want to find some that have large readership, because then they're going to come up, they're getting a lot of readers, a lot of people linking, that helps improve your search engine ranking. Your work is showing up at the top when people Google it. Okay. Join reference managers in academic social networks. Now, you might be aware of some of these, you might not, but spend time checking these out and talk to your library, whether I don't know if you're faculty in the Rary campus in Denver or where you are, but find out what things perhaps your university might be doing. But these are a few of the things, and there's a lot others, that you can establish a profile, upload your work, share your work, and maybe you don't even actually upload the papers because of copyright issues. You could still add citations, and you allow people to find these communities, other places, and Google to find your work being referenced, being cited essentially online in a website that then's gonna help, once again, improve search engine ranking. So you might find you want to join all of these. You might find you only select 1 or 2. Academia is a neat one because one of the things you can do is you can get updates from them where whenever someone Googles you, they will let you know. And so that's a very cool service that they have. Okay. Another thing to improve your kind of self as a thought leader and to establish your brand, your presence, is that you could create research-focused websites. And if you don't like the word research, think of teaching-focused websites. If you want to think of it as a wiki, go for it. Call it what you want. The content can be what you want. But the idea is that here's a group where my research tends to focus on social presence, but Community of Inquiry is this was started by, I believe Garrison started this, but he was he was the founders of this theory, this model, and he's created this website that not only publishes his own work, but other people's work on the same topics. And so, this is one that I just started thinking about, and I bought the domain for, I think it's socialpresenceresearch.com, because I'm going to start putting social presence research where I talk about my own research on social presence, but other people, and to help other people find me and find me as someone who researches social presence. So it doesn't have to be research focused, it could be teaching focused. You want to establish yourself as an expert of teaching X, Y, and Z, or work with your students to create wikis. I mean, always think about FERPA and all of that, but there are ways that you can create websites. And I'm not talking just something on wiki spaces, but something where you actually add a personal domain. Once again, this is some investment. But maybe you're spending $30, $40 a year on domain names. I argue in the long run it's well worth it. But once again, you might not need or want to do all of these things, but these are all different ways to do it, to establish your web presence and improve your search engine ranking. Okay. 11. Leverage social media. So it's not just that you should be creating a website, that you should be creating new content, that you should be sharing your content on your website. You should also be pushing these things out on social media outlets. Now, Joni and I have done some research, and we recognize that, some students hate Twitter, or some disciplines, find that Facebook is where everyone's congregating. Others, maybe it's LinkedIn. Who knows? But the idea is that whether you like them or not, I believe you should have an account with each one of these, and where appropriate, share news about the work that you're doing. Now, for me, Facebook is one of those weird places where I don't even want to call them friends, but connections with people from my past. Some of them are friends, some of them are just connections. But it tends to be a very personal, personal not in the real sense of building solid relationships, but personal in the sense of these are just people from my past. It's not a professional network for me. There are some people I am professionally networked with Facebook, but Facebook's a place actually I would never share that I published X, Y, and Z. Because I could just see my friends being like, "What are you talking about, you geek?" Like they just don't get it, and my audience isn't that big there. For other people, it might be totally different. Twitter is a place where just like I mentioned for this presentation, I blogged about it. I then tweeted the present about it so people know. But it's not just that. I mean, LinkedIn has a place where you can add links to your publications. You can add links to your website, etc. Leverage social media. So find out which ones work for you and use them how you want. But if you Google me, some of the things that come up are tweets that I do on Twitter, right? And so, but that's the flip side too, is you got to think about your digital footprint and what you do on these social media sites, because you don't want that to actually be hurting your brand, if you will, or your reputation as a thought leader. Okay. Number 12, complete all profiles. So if you have a profile, let's say with YouTube, you have a YouTube account, you have a Blogger account, you have a Twitter account, I don't care what it is. You should take that time to fill out that profile as much as you can, where you describe the work you do, the research you do, add keywords. So if you're a guy who does social presence, have social presence. If you're a social media guy, add that. If ebooks are your thing, add that. And link to your personal website. Always link to your personal website. Possibly link to even another page on your personal website where you list your publications or your whatever it is that you're working on. Teaching materials, you name it. But each one of these you want pointing back to your site. Because if someone finds you through SlideShare, you don't want them just to find your slides. You want them to be curious and say, what else do they do? And you want them to click on your personal website and find you. Google Scholar. So this is one I don't think I did, but I'm going to actually get out of here and I'm going to show you something. This is something that's relatively new. And so I'm going to start Safari, so just work with me here for a minute. And I'm assuming that you guys don't have questions, and we're going to have Q&A times too, but I hope this is kind of what you expected. Alright, so if you go to scholar.google.com and you go to Google Scholar, you can now create what's called a user profile in Google Scholar. I had actually read about this probably a month or two ago. I finally went on and did it. Well, what it does is it creates this great little screen that shows me how much we're in. And honestly, if junior faculty, they might not have any citations, and so, probably dozens of these citations is me citing myself. But this is something that every academic should have, is you should set up your Google Scholar profile. Alright, so let's get the back channels going, so that's good. Let's get back to this, complete all profiles. Alright, the next thing, and there's only 15 of these, so I'm wrapping up, is carefully name your work. So Joni and I have, for a while, came up with all these creative names for our work. Like one of them's Hot for Teacher, using digital music and online courses. Hot for Teacher, we loved it. Like, it just makes us giggle. Van Halen, yes. And we've even had people, when we do a conference presentation on that, said that it's too racy and they want us to rename it. But we finally published that title. So we have suffice to say, Joni is the title master, and we've had a lot of fun with this. But since I've been thinking about this the last 2 years, I've been thinking about how that can actually hurt you, having too creative of a title. You want to think keywords. What are the keywords for your research in your area? When someone Googles social presence, I want them to find me. What is it that you want people to find you for? Well, you have to think about how you embed those keywords in your work, in the titles, in the article, in the abstract, in the paper, in the headings, etc. But let's just talk about namings. So here's two articles that Joni and I did, both on basically the same topic, Twitter and education. One of them, we use the word Twitter in the title. The other, we do not. One was cited 66 times, one was cited 22. What's even more interesting about this is that the one that was cited 22 times is an open access journal. So people can get it freely, the other is not open access. And so the argument being is it's even more important to think carefully about having a keyword-driven title. All right. And even thinking through on your site, how you're using keywords when you blog, when you do other things. And obviously you don't want to go, people will argue you don't want to have too many keywords, etc. But think about how you name things. Even if it's your presentations. Doesn't have to be just publications, right, in the traditional sense. Number 14, share publications on social bookmarking sites. You have a delicious site, post all the work that goes back to your personal website so you can share it with others, because on Delicious, other people can search your bookmarks. Same with Digo. So this is a way that you want people, if they're searching your bookmarks, to find out work that you've done. Once again, you don't want sometimes people might just be going straight through a Google search. Sometimes they might find you through SlideShare. Sometimes it might through Digo. You want people to find your work any and everywhere. Alright, last but not least is you need to promote new presentations and publications. Now this is the part that's kind of awkward. Like for me, I don't know if I could ever email someone out of the blue and say, oh, you write about X, you might like my work. Now that's a great strategy and people do it. My personality doesn't work. With that said, if I find people doing stuff and they're asking, hey, where's some other research on X, Y, and Z? Let's say I find that out through a Google alert. I'll log in and talk to them about my work because they've asked. Well, this is one of the few ways that I try to push rather than pull people to my content. And I did this at UCD, and I need to change my signature at Boise to do it. But I argue that you should at least list at the very bottom of your signature a place that says recent publications, and if you don't want to list out the titles, list out your personal website, so patricklowenthal.com/publications, and have it start with a heading that says recent publications, and so people are interested, and it can be buried in your email signature. But I found that, especially just emailing something out to a listserv, where I was just trying to, take part in the community, someone clicked on and read one of my articles and actually commented and emailed me back to discuss it. So this is an example of someone who might not have ever known my work, might never have, and who knows, maybe there were a couple other on the list that noticed it as well. So I've struggled. You don't want it to become 4 is the max that I'll put on there. Really 2 is probably a better number, but you want people to sit there and say, situational qualities, exceptional presenters, that sounds interesting, and you want them to go for it. And the more they keep going to it, and the more they share it with people, the higher your search engine ranking goes, right? So this is the end of what I've done that I've come up with. But the idea is to kind of wrap up this argument, and then we'll take part in any discussion and brainstorming, is this idea that it's not good enough to do your work in private on your campus. You need to share it with others. And it's not good enough just to find that top-tier journal and publish there. You need to have a web presence, you need to help Google find you, and you need to regularly check on your web presence and tweak it as needed. Because whether it's you're a tenure-track professor, whether you're looking for a job, how many of you, if you've been on a search committee, have you Googled the people who are trying to get a job for you? I Google people all the time. And when I don't see stuff, it makes me wonder, why don't they have a web presence? When I do see stuff, I think about what they have and how they've chosen to craft that presence. But the idea is you need to help people find you in this Google world. So hopefully this paper will be published soon. We're hoping at the Chronicle of Higher Ed. Who knows? For now, you can find slides at slideshare.net/P-Lowenthal. I will also put them on my personal website, like I said, embedding them. And I will put and post this recording so other people can get this as well. So with that, I am done yakking. I'm going to stop sharing for now, and we're going to see where this conversation is going.
Good job, Patrick. Thanks very much. And as you said, we're opening up for
Mike's got a Google Scholar profile. Nice. I mean, this is something too. So I'm giving you in ways theories, but I can actually show you proof that I've been doing a lot of these things for about 2 years. And when you go to Google certain things that I shouldn't come up on the first page, I do. Why? Because I've been doing this for 2 years is my argument. Now, I have two colleagues, and actually we're going to this next year, we're going to test these theories. So I'm going to first take my wife. She's publishing her first article. She doesn't really have a web presence, even though I bought her domain name. We're going to test and see how, because there was actually an article recently that said papers that are tweeted more get cited more. So I want to see if we craft her web presence, how her article is promoted and distributed. Because her and I get in these arguments that she thinks she can reach people more through presentations, and I argue that through the web and through papers you can do it. And obviously it's both, right? It's neither either or. But and I have another colleague who, John Wesley, why do I talk about? He already has a web presence, but I think he can be doing a lot more. And so we're going to walk through this next year of tracking analytics and doing certain things, and I'm going to try to improve mine and do some of the things more regularly that I don't do as well. Because all of those like reference sites, I don't have all my current work, and so I want to try to see over this next year with 3 cases, if you will, how it changes. How does our search engine ranking change? Because as I spend time doing this work, I want other people to read it. Sure, it'd be nice if they cite it, but I just want people to read my work and hopefully discuss it, critique it, build on it, cite it, reference it, etc. All right, so what's Boxcar? See, and that's the thing is I don't even know all these. Nice. Well, and that's some of the things we didn't really talk about. I mean, this idea that impact. The traditional way that academics like to measure impact is, are you cited by others, and do you publish in the top tier, most respectable journal that like 89% get rejected from? And I argue that impact is actually more about people reading and writing and being influenced and building upon your work, and it doesn't have to be just a scholarship or academics who do that. So rethinking, what impact means in your field. I got a dual screen, so I'm just looking over at the... One of the things I didn't mention too, we talk about Zotero and other things, is Eric. Eric, received, if funding was demolished. I don't know the history of Eric, and any librarians in the group you can help. But that's another place where you can do things to help share your work is, post stuff in Eric. There's so many of these out there. And honestly, I think that you don't want to go crazy where this is like you become obsessed with it. But the idea, and I tried to think about doing a flow chart of what happens. Well, you do a workshop or you do a presentation. Well, the first part is you should do the front work and you craft the presentation or the workshop or the paper. The next thing is you upload it, because then during the presentation, maybe you have handouts, but maybe you say, go see my work. By doing that, it helps build your ranking, okay? But then they can always find it and they can share it with others, right? Whereas if they only have that one copy, how many people can they share it with? Then what you do is after the presentation is you go through making sure that you log it, update your Vita, and you go through this cycle. My guess is once you get the cycle going, the whole process of that you're not doing now but would be doing is probably less than 30 minutes more per workshop, presentation, or paper. I think there's it's a good point. And so the point is, like, how do you make yourself in these places always? And so I have a presence on Twitter, and I guess I would say I agree with you and I don't agree with you, or it depends on what you mean by regular, and your own personal preference can dictate that, or your just workload. Twitter. I've been on Twitter a number of years. I tweet throughout the week, but I'm not one of these people that have 20,000 tweets. I just don't, and so the same way with blogging. I will go through cycles where I will blog more than others, but it's interesting if I pulled up my Google Analytics, how the number of visits to my site change each week based on when I post. And so, yes, if you want it to really strong, being regular helps, but it's more about, someone just talked about, it's the quality, right? You want to do things that make people read. I'm interested in this paper that I'm writing on this theory because some people are doing some of this. People aren't talking about it, and it's this idea of scholarship is changing, and especially junior scholars who are interacting with social media versus tenured full professors who don't even have a web presence. We find ourselves in different worlds, and I argue that it's going to matter more whether Google finds you, rather than certain library databases find you. Could be wrong. It's probably a little bit of both. I think that's a very good point. I mean, it's you don't like some people, and I'm giving Twitter as an example, but that's not. I mean, LinkedIn. There's a lot of places out here. But there are people out there who just collect, visitors, if you will, followers, however you want to look at it. They follow everyone. I think you're better off finding where's your niche, where's your group of people, what are they doing that you care about and they care about, and you're going to have better luck there than trying to be all things to all people. So even when you think about your brand, for instance, my brand really is, I'm in teaching and learning online, but there's no way I'm going to become on the first page of a Google search for that. And it's not specific enough. So you have to focus on what is it really that you care about and that you do. Now, in my world, I write about e-portfolios. I write about all kinds of things, but I don't want. It's not that I don't want it. I don't really care if people email X, Y, and Z and always find me. But when they email a certain type of thing, like social presence, which is what I care about, I want them to find me. And what's fascinating, so if you Google social presence, I come up on the first page. If you go into Google Scholar, and I've published some on this, I'm like page 15, right? It's because there's the number one people have been cited 500 times, where my best piece is cited 66. I'm just not showing up. All right. And about me, I don't. And that's the thing is, if you really wanted to spend time, and the thing is, there's going to be, because I don't have an about me page, there's going to be a new site left and right? A new place to be. I mean, people question what the next Twitter or Facebook's going to be. Who knows? Thanks, Luke. Wordsmithing is key. I mean, it's kind of part of this too. Is like, I remember for a long time I would write my own resume. Right? Anyone can write a resume. And then this was before I got into education. I was working in restaurants and I was trying to get a job. And I had degrees in religion. I'm working in a restaurant. I paid a service to write my resume. They did surveys, and it was amazing what these people did. And so there was this part about it, like, depending on what you do, you might need to talk to veteran faculty to talk about what are the keywords that you might not know. How do you craft that brand? How do you craft yourself as a thought leader? Depends, but all right. I think that consistency is key. With video, you talk about just having that consistent brand. I mean, there's debates about identity, and I don't want to get into that, though I find it really interesting discussion as, lots of people have argued for a long time, we code shift, we have multiple identities, but it's this idea, do you have to have one web presence, right? Could you have different personalities? You could. I think, though, that you're better off with your search engine ranking having one type of voice. Now, for me, Facebook, it's a little different. I just share photos, but my academic voice, if you will, I try to publish mostly through any other venue. Because personal people, they're rarely, Googling me. And most people, if they find my work, it's not because they're like, oh, Patrick Lawnlaw, because I'm not famous, right? But if they Google the topics, the keywords, that's how I hope they find me. Yep, red bike. The Wayback Machine, so that's my portfolio, and actually I still have that online, and so some people would say get rid of it. The reason I don't, because that's from 2003, I think, and I try to say it on there so people know. So that was my master's portfolio when I got my master's based in instructional technology. And I've kept it live. And I've done that because I teach in the ILT program, and for a long time they've just linked back to it. It is something that, some people would argue with crafting my brand, I should get rid of that, right? I should just focus on what I do now. But yeah, no, the Wayback Machine, you can actually see iterations of my site. Well, we are about out of time, guys. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, I guess we are. And Patrick, fantastic job. And this was all very helpful. And the comments that folks made throughout the discussion, maybe you'll get a chance to look at the archive and look back. But there were some great comments too. So I thank all the attendees for their great feedback and sharing of ideas and contact info, etc. Patrick, great job, and a great team attending today too. So thanks everybody. And next week we'll be talking about ebooks. Mike Edwards will be talking more about how to create an ebook and all of that. So we look forward to seeing y'all again. And thanks again, Patrick. Y'all have a great weekend.